Let's bring in former Pentagon press secretary and that's now national security analyst, Admiral John Kirby. Admiral, first, your reaction to the renewed attacks. Do you think Iran's trying to bait the U.S. into resuming the fighting?
It seems like both sides want to stop the war, but neither side wants to stop the fighting. I think to some degree this is predictable that there would be these constant back and forth, these strikes back and forth, these attempts to change the calculus in the Strait of Hormuz as both sides try to jockey for some kind of leverage at the negotiating table. But it's, these are real lethal threats. And these ships came under real attack that you can't just dismiss. I think that what's going to probably play out here is as we continue to get close to some sort of negotiated settlement, you're going to continue to see both sides continue to lob missiles or drones. You'll continue to see the blockade enforced, all about either side trying to gain more leverage at the table.
And Inzamam alluded to this new Washington Post reporting of a CIA analyst that finds analysis that finds Iran can survive the U.S. naval blockade for at least 3 to 4 months before facing more economic hardship, for people familiar with the document said. And then you factor in last month's assessment that Iran retains half its launchers, plus all the reporting that Iran has damaged U.S. assets more than the government has let on. Is the Trump administration telling the American public the full story?
It's hard to know the answer to that one, Anna. I mean, because I'm not in the room and I don't have access to the intelligence anymore. I wish that they had been more forthcoming about the justification for going into this war at the beginning. And I certainly wish that throughout its conduct, they could be more transparent, more accommodating to the media and to the American people than they have been. It's difficult to sort of parse out what's political rhetoric and what Mr. Trump is trying to do to gain that leverage over the Iranians from the actual military success or failure and the things that we're doing on the ground to make a difference. When I watch and I listen and I read, I pay close attention to what the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is saying and what the commander of the U.S. Central Command, Admiral Cooper, is saying, because I think that's probably the most accurate contextual amount of information you're going to get in terms of what's actually going on. But no, I don't think they get high marks, nor should they get high marks for complete transparency about the conduct of this war.
What do you see as the biggest hurdle to a peace deal right now?
So there's two things. I mean, one is the Strait of Hormuz, obviously, and getting that back open. And as your reporter in the UAE rightly said, the Iranians now realize that in some ways, that's their nuclear option. They have weaponized the Strait of Hormuz. They have weaponized the economic impact that the Strait has, that choke point has. And so it's really going to be important coming out of this that there's some sort of opening of the Strait that is sustainable and verifiable and doesn't leave Iran in control of that. No country should be in control of that Strait. It's international waters. The second piece of this, and I give Secretary Rubio credit for this because the Iranians wanted to separate the nuclear program from the Strait of Hormuz, and Rubio said, no, we're not going to do that. And I think that's the right approach. I think they need to be able to come out of this negotiation with some sort of limit on Iran's enrichment capability and a plan to get that highly enriched uranium out of the country in a verifiable way so that it's transparent, that it's actually gone, and you get some commitment from the Iranians that they're not going to continue to pursue that kind of enrichment.
There's been this two-track talk going on in terms of the deal between the U.S. and Iran and then talks between Israel and Lebanon. And we're learning that there's going to be a new round of talks between Lebanon and Israel next week. How much of what happens there hinges on Prime Minister Netanyahu? What do you see as the Netanyahu factor in any kind of peace deal and peace in general in the region?
I think it's critical. As a matter of fact, when we were talking about the nuclear program, you can better believe that the Israelis are going to be watching if there is negotiations, whatever those negotiations have to say about Iran's nuclear program, because that matters much more to Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Israeli people than the Strait of Hormuz. For them, a nuclear armed Iran is not just a national security threat, it's an existential threat. So they will be very keenly watching and probably be in some level of coordination as the U.S. and Iran begin to start to negotiate what could be the future of Iran's nuclear program. And then, of course, as you rightly said, there's the Hezbollah component. Hezbollah is a proxy of Iran. They are still a threat, a national security threat to the people of Israel. And so while those talks are going on a separate track, they are absolutely related to the overall conflict in Iran. And again, Israel has a stake in both. They obviously have a huge stake in the threats coming from Hezbollah into the north. But as I said, they view a nuclear armed Iran as an existential threat, much more important to them than the Strait of Hormuz. And so I would expect Prime Minister Netanyahu will be maybe not a public, but a certainly central figure in the progress of these negotiations going forward.
Admiral John Kirby, thank you for being with us on this Friday.